Rabbi Smith made me out to be like some kind of great Eloi, a great sage with in-depth halachic discussions or whatever. The truth is, I'm a pretty simple guy. People who know me, I keep making sure that they should know that I'm a pretty simple guy, and I don't want people to think I'm more than just simple. So, you know, if you set the bar low, anything you do better is already great, you know. So they would say that about President Bush. The bar was so low that if he was able to do better than that, oh, you know, it was a great thing. So the same thing with me, simple. And as you know, I'm sure Rabbi Smith may have told you already, you know, we are sitting today literally in the middle. And a middle is a very important thing, because a middle, for example, when the Jewish people were told to build a tabernacle in the desert, a mishkan, they had to build walls, of which those walls would have certain pipes, certain bars that would be connected to the top and then as well to the bottom. And then there was what was called a bria chatichen, a middle bar that ran through all the boards, all of the krushim, the boards that would then go around the whole wall, the whole tabernacle, to make sure fastened and to keep it tight very well. In other words, the bria chaticha, the middle, is sometimes more important than either side. So when you have a day like this, Rosh Chodesh Tamuz, which comes right smack dab in the middle of one holiday that we in Lubavitch just celebrated, which is the holiday of Chav Ches Sivan, the 28th day of Sivan, the day which it says the Rebbe and his Rebbitzin came to what's called the Chatzi Kader HaTachton, to the lower half, meaning to the east side of the globe of where they were before, to the New World. And that began really the new push of what's called Hafatzas Hayadus, to go out and to bring outreach, to do outreach to all Jewish people. As a matter of fact, as I've heard many times from my father and from others, that when the Rebbe, as a young man still, came in for the first time to his father-in-law as he was fabrenging in public in 770, it's the first time that the idea of Hafatzas Hayadus, the spreading of Yiddishkeit, not just the original imperative given to us by the Baal Shem Tov, which was the Hafatzas HaMayanos, the spreading of the well springs, which means the inner core of Torah, but just spreading the basics of Yiddishkeit to all people, to be able to really live up to the statement that the previous Rebbe made when he came to America, which was that America is nicht anders, that America is no different than the old shtetl, than the old Eastern Europe way of life, and that he's come to reignite a new fire in the land of the free and the home of the brave, where Jewish people were very cold towards Yiddishkeit. It was his son-in-law ultimately who really took the reins and started to make that huge difference under his father-in-law's leadership, and then later on exponentially when he became the successor to his father-in-law. And that began really at the time that the Rebbe came to America, when the first time that he entered into a Fabrengen in his father-in-law's presence, that the Frierdiker Rebbe actually spoke about it for the first time. And this was a big chiddush, as it's called. It was a new innovation, a new level in the work of Lubavitch that did not exist as much before until then. I mean, Lubavitch always did a lot of work to bring Balei Tshuva back to Yiddishkeit and so on. But the main thrust was always to bring in and to be Mekar of all Jews into Chassidus. Whereas now it's not just about teaching Chassidus, it's about literally teaching the basics and about bringing Jews back to just know what their Yiddishkeit is and what their neshama is. And that requires both teaching the basics as well as the neshama, as well as the core, which is Chassidus. So this began on Chav Ches Sivan, the 28th day of Sivan, when the Rebbe and his Rebbitzin landed on the shores of America, not too, a little bit, over a half a year later, after his father-in-law came to America, or more, a little bit, a year later. I don't remember exactly the exact year. I think a year later, a little bit over a year later. So the bottom line is, this is already to Chabad, to Lubavitch. This is a very important day, and the Rebbe himself called it a Yom Tov. He called it a holiday, which means that it's a very important day. If the Rebbe himself is calling it a holiday, it's a holiday to his Chassidim, to all Jews who are connected to him. And then we're, of course, coming up to this Shabbos, which is perhaps, you can say, the most important day to all Chassidim, to all Lubavitchers all over the world, as well as to any Jew that was connected to the Rebbe, if you want to call them friends of Lubavitch or whatever name you want to give them. But if you were connected to the Rebbe, Gimmel Tamuz is the most important day. And why is that the most important day? It's called a Yom Hilula. It's called a day of elevation, a day of rejoicing. It is a yahrzeit. What is a yahrzeit? What's a Yom Hilula? So in Chassidus, it explains that this Yom Hilula that we're about to approach and to celebrate, because by a tzaddik, a Yom Hilula, a yahrzeit, is a celebration. The reason it is a celebration is because everything that the tzaddik did over the past year, because remember, a tzaddik doesn't really die, let alone a tzaddik on the level of a leader of his generation never really dies. And this is already spoken about in great length in Tanya by the Alter Rebbe yet, regarding his mentor and colleague, Rabbi Nachum Mendel of Haradok, of Vitebsk, and how he explains over there that even when a tzaddik dies, the Zohar says that his presence is felt and found even more so. More, not just the same, not less, not even the same, but more so than it was when he was here physically. And there, I'm not going to go through this, is not the point of my discussion, but it is, the basic idea is that since a tzaddik, as the Alter Rebbe explains, is all about spirituality, even when he's here on this earth, his neshama is predominant, not his body, whereas by us, normal people, our bodies are predominant. We don't even get this, we don't even see or personally even realize our own neshamas. We're so sunken into the material things of this, the coarse things of this world. But a tzaddik is different. A true tzaddik, a leader, a prince, a king, so to speak, because the Gemara calls the sages our kings. When they are on this earth, it's not about their body. As Hillel Hazak and Hillel the Elder once said, I am going to now feed my embarrassment, my shamefulness. What did he mean? He meant that he has to now give his body some food. For him, his body was a nothing more but a coarse material that covered up under his main life. What was his main life? His neshama, his learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. To him, that was it. Or there's the famous story about the colleague, one of the oldest colleagues of the Alter Rebbe, of the Maggid of Mezrich. One of the colleagues of the Alter Rebbe was also a disciple of the Maggid. Reb Nachum of Chernobyl, who was the founder of the Chernobyl dynasty and many other dynasties that come from him. The famous Square Chassidim, the Square Chassidim are all from Reb Nachum of Chernobyl. So in Reb Nachum, he was a person who lived a very poor life, even though he had many Chassidim and could have been much more wealthier. But he lived a very quiet, a very down-to-earth, poor, unwealthy life, like you see today, many big Rebbes today walking around with fur coats, and they're all like very big and very wealthy. But he didn't. Reb Nachum was a very poor person and gave whatever he used to have. It was famous that by him, whatever money he had by day was not there overnight. No money that he had by day slept overnight. It was always given to poor people, to people who needed help, to marry off their children, and so on and so forth. Many stories about that. But one thing that was known by Reb Nachum as well was that he was always fasting. He didn't feel the need to eat. His service to God was one with fasting. and involved in complete spirituality. And yet, ironically, he was a very corpulent individual. And these two things obviously didn't make sense. He's not eating carbs. He's not even eating calories. And he doesn't seem to lose any weight. And he was quite corpulent. And everybody knew, there was no question. Nachum, trust me, he didn't sneak in the middle of the night while his Rebbitzin wasn't looking to eat a little cholent or to eat some babka or whatever. No, don't worry about it. That's not what Nachum did. You could trust him when people knew he fasted, he fasted. That's who he was. So somebody once asked him, had a little bit, chutzpah a little bit, and asked, I don't understand. Where does the corpulency, where does the fats come from? So he answered him from Amen Yehei Shmei Rabbah. When he would answer Amen and Yehei Shmei Rabbah and answer the holy things of davening, that was his carbs. Literally. That made his body fat. That's what he had pleasure in. In general, as I always tell people when I talk to them, right, if I bring with them, try this out. Many people don't understand this. There's a very simple way to diet, and you will almost surely lose weight. Swallow your food, don't taste it, and you'll lose weight. Or eat your food without your reading glasses. Many people, I've always noticed this, even as a child, and I couldn't understand why. Later on, when I grew up and I understood what it means to taste good food, I also, no different than anybody else, you put your glasses on, and you eat your gefilte fish, and you eat your chicken, and you eat your steak. Nobody eats without their glasses. Why? But you can't see the meat there. You can't see it good enough. So because you can't see it good enough, the taste is not the same. Or try eating in the dark. Nobody likes to eat in the dark. Why not? It's the same meat. It's the same steak. It's the same lamb chops. Why can't you eat in the dark? Very simple. Because you can't taste it that well. Seeing is necessary. And again, I can go into a long discussion about this, but the bottom line is that there's a very good way to diet. Either swallow and don't taste, but that could be maybe problematic, other reasons. But better yet, don't wear your glasses or eat in the dark, shut off the lights, and I guarantee you in a month or two, you're 20 pounds lighter. Why? Because carbs really are all about pleasure. That's where you gain your weight. That's the bane of our existence. That's the problem in everything that we do. It's the pleasure in the physical. The moment you have pleasure in the physical, it affects you physically. As the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, Nasadamu Basar Kibsara, it becomes like flesh and blood and becomes a part of you. But when your pleasure is in the spiritual, just like when it's by you in the physical, by Rab Nachum, it was in the spiritual. Then it affected him because of the spiritual. And his great pleasure, the carbs he would receive, was from the Amen and Yehei Shmei Rabbah, and it affected him. What does that show you? A tzaddik's life, a real tzaddik. A tzaddik, as the Alter Rebbe and Tanya explains what a tzaddik is, who are very few and far between. Today, everybody's a tzaddik. Everybody's a rebbe. Everybody's a tzaddik. Everybody's a baba. If you're a Sephardi, you have many babas. Everybody's going around and collecting money on their righteousness. Righteousness has now become a big business. You walk around with already credit card things, and you have a gabbai taking your money. The tzaddik doesn't take your money. The gabbai takes it for him. And by the way, there's an old joke. By Jews, it was always known the most successful rebbes were always the ones who had the best gabbais. That's how it always is. Remember that. It's who your second in command is. He can either make it or break it for you. So the same thing is over here. When it's spiritual, however, and that's your life, then that's a real tzaddik. If it affects you physically, that shows what kind of a tzaddik you really are. And that's who Reb Nachum was, and that's what the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, that when Menachem Mendel of Haradat passed away, in his letter of consolation, condolence to his Talmidim in Eretz Yisrael in Israel, he makes it clear and explains that the truth is there's nothing there's nothing to mourn. There's really nothing to be sad, because you should know that he is here. And not only is he here, he's here more so than he was when he was physically alive. The Zohar says that clearly. The Alter Rebbe is not lying. The Alter Rebbe is not trying to make exaggerations. The Alter Rebbe is not joking around or just saying words to make you feel good. The Alter Rebbe was giving us a clear principle, a principle based on Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai Zohar. And that means to say, even though Rabbi Menachem Mendel of Haradok was not there, he's there as much, and if not more so, than he was when he was physically alive. And the reason is, says the Alter Rebbe, because a tzaddik is chayim nafshim. It's a soul life. Chayim ruchnim, a spiritual life, not chayim besarim. It never was a physical or a corporeal life by a tzaddik. So the fact that he dies, what happens? When you're living on this earth, even if you're a tzaddik, and even if the corporeal is not your life, but the corporeal didn't go away. The corporeal's there. The neshama of the tzaddik is in the corporeal. It's in the corpus. The corpus is a minute and a finite thing. And so as great as a tzaddik can be, as incredible and as powerful and dynamic as he may be, he's still confined in a body. Hence, even Hillel Hazak and Hillel the Elder had to say, I have to stop now from learning because I have to go feed my body, my shamefulness. Because if it was up to him, he wouldn't take the time to feed his body, because he would just be sitting and learning Torah, and that's it. But he knows that if he wants to sit and learn Torah, yes, he has to feed his body. The body has to be taken into account. Even by the greatest of the greatest, the body still needs to be taken into account. And you got to deal with it. It's one half of your existence. Even though perhaps it's a half that becomes a vehicle to your spiritual existence, but it's still there. The vehicle is still there. But when a person dies and divests himself from that body, so when it's a normal person, all right, he goes where he has to go, the neshama goes where it goes, and it does what it has to do. Or hopefully in the end, it'll be in Gan Eden. But a tzaddik is here still. Why is he still here? Because his teachings are here. His disciples are here. The fruit of his labor, what he worked for in this world, is here. And therefore, he doesn't leave them. And because he doesn't leave them, and he's without a body now, there are no limitations on his work and on his impact. It is without limitation. And now, therefore, his impact is even greater than it was when he was physically alive. And by the way, if you want to look at it in actual fact, you can take a look at Chabad when it was at the time until the Rebbe passed away, till the Rebbe was nistalik, as we call it, as we say, was ascended to heaven, so to speak. And take a look afterwards and the exponential growth of Lubavitch, who many foretold, and there have been articles about it, there were TV shows about it, foretold its demise, has not only not demised, but on the contrary, has grown exponentially. Then even when the Rebbe was physically alive. And why is that clear? Because the Rebbe is never not alive. The Rebbe is constantly here. He's constantly prodding. He's constantly pushing. He's constantly teaching. He's constantly here for us. And he never goes away. A true master, a true teacher, a true Rebbe doesn't leave his people. It's, of course, as we know, Moshe Rabbeinu was not allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael. Last week's part, even before that, but the time yet of the golden calf, even already was the beginning of that reason. But over time, we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was not allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael, and he did not. And in the end, even though he could have gone in to be buried into Eretz Yisrael, he was given that choice. Moshe Rabbeinu chose to be buried in the desert. If everything to Moshe Rabbeinu was about Eretz Yisrael and going into Eretz Yisrael, and to Moshe Rabbeinu going into Eretz Yisrael was not about starting a Zionist government. That's not what his purpose was. Moshe Rabbeinu was not Theodore Herzl, chas v'shalom. Moshe Rabbeinu was a person who knew the value and the holiness of Eretz Yisrael, because it's only in Eretz Yisrael that you could start to do the mitzvahs that he was commanded, and that he commanded the Jewish people, which he could not do in the desert and never was able to do. That's the one thing Moshe Rabbeinu missed out. He could not do most of the commandments that God commanded the Jews when they entered into the land of Israel. So now, Moshe Rabbeinu, okay, couldn't go in alive, but at least be buried in the Holy Land. At least get that much. And he could have. But Moshe Rabbeinu wouldn't. Why didn't he? Because Moshe Rabbeinu chose to stay in the desert even after death. The reason is because through him and to his credit and his power did he know that the Dair Hamidbar, the generation of the desert, would rise up in the resurrection and one day be able to go into the land of Israel. It's because of him and being the leader of that generation that he would be able to pull them out and bring them with him into Eretz Yisrael. Otherwise, they would have no tikkun. They would not be able to go in. For that reason, Moshe is willing to remove and to take away and to diminish any pleasure, self-pleasure, his neshama could have had by going into Eretz Yisrael, which it says those who are buried in Eretz Yisrael will rise up immediately. Those who are buried outside have to roll around through tunnels, whatever that means. But Moshe Rabbeinu was willing to accept the lesser and the least amount of pleasure. Why? On behalf of his people. Which means to say, even after death, Moshe Rabbeinu is still functioning. He's still there, and he's still working and doing what is necessary as a leader. And that's, by the way, one of the reasons why it says he was buried opposite the Midbar Paran, where the idol of Pa'ar, rather, where it says the idol of Pa'ar, where he was buried nearby. Why was Moshe Rabbeinu buried next to such a terrible idol, which caused the Jewish people always a lot of problems? The answer is, once again, Moshe Rabbeinu was willing to lower himself, give himself less spiritual pleasure, to be near an idol that he knew was always the bane of the existence of the Jewish people, that caused them so much problems, so that he could be there to be melamed chus on the Jewish people. So he could be there to always speak good for the Jewish people, to defend the Jewish people, and to hold them back and hold God back from being angry at his people because of this terrible idol. What does that show us again? A tzaddik doesn't rest. A tzaddik doesn't take a time off. Tzaddikim yelchu mechayil chayil. They're constantly going from level to level. They never rest even after they pass away, when supposedly that's when the real vacation starts. That's the spiritual club med. And now you just get to sit back with a Mai Tai and an umbrella and just be neder miziv shchina. You're now having pleasure from the radiance of the shchina. That's it. No more mitzvahs, no more work. By a tzaddik of the caliber of a leader of a generation, the work never ends. The Rebbe does not take time off, even just like in his lifetime. Imagine this. Anybody know of a Rebbe or a Rosh Yeshiva of a big yeshiva that doesn't take 2, 3, 4 weeks off vacation? No, I don't know of such a Rebbe. The biggest Rebbes, they go to the country, they go to Palm Springs, they go to New Hampshire, they go to whatever, they go to who knows where. It's called Rebbe time, me time. It's for themselves. They have to re-energize themselves to lead their flock. But the Rebbe didn't need to re-energize. The Rebbe didn't take a day off. Forget about a week or 2 or 3 or 4. Didn't take a day off all of the years of his leadership. You really want to know what 24/365 means? Look at the Rebbe. 24/7, 365. These hashtags started way before it became so famous today. That was who the Rebbe was. He needs rest. You know what the Rebbe's rest was? You know what his pleasure was? Was getting the feedback and feeding into his people, into the flock, and that came back to him. And that's why he is who he is even today, and why he's felt even more so today, after Gimmel Tamuz, the yahrzeit, when he went up to heaven, that he is today to be found. His legacy, his neshama, his work is here clear as day in our lives, no less and even more so in many ways, and so many stories upon stories, which I'm not here to go tell all these stories. I don't know all these stories, but you constantly find out these stories, new stories, first-hand accounts of who the Rebbe is and what he's continuing even now. So when we are now here in the middle between these two special days, And Gimmel Tamuz being perhaps the epitome, the apex, the crescendo of all of it, because it is the time when it says, when a tzaddik is yahrzeit is being celebrated, the Yom Hilula, the celebration is for us more than the tzaddik. Meaning to say, because of the tzaddik and our connection to him, he elevates us now. Yom Hilula, the day of elevation, he elevates us now with him more so than at any other time of the year. Which is why in general it says a Yom Hilula of a tzaddik is a special time. There is no better time to pray, to ask him to give you blessing, for him to send your prayers to the right place that it should go to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is the whole idea of going to the Rebbe's Ohel and all the stories that come with that. But especially on Gimmel Tamuz, there is no more appropriate, more auspicious time, because this is the time that we become elevated through the tzaddik and our connection with him. So I want to also say, therefore, since this is the Bria Chatich in the middle of both, that connects us to both matters here, that the truth is you can also find this in today's Torah portion that we learn on Wednesday. Wednesday's Torah portion begins with a very terrible, sad thing. Some of the Jewish people rebelled against Moshe. They called Moshe's leadership into question, his decisions into question. And we all know what happened. And so God tells Moshe to tell everybody to steer clear from these individuals. And we're talking mainly, of course, Korach, Adosai, his congregation, his people, who were Dasan and Aviram. Ayin ben Pelas, one of them actually did tshuva and he got out early. He was able to, thank God, save himself. But Dasan and Aviram were known, as we call them in Yiddish, chutzpanyakis. And they were in your face. You know, you think about today's people, many people today in your face. Today being in your face is a big deal. It's celebrated. Dasan and Aviram were the first in your face people. All the way going back yet to Mitzrayim yet, when they already started up with Moshe. Sorry, I don't have real mashka, so this is my mashka. So Moshe had a history with them, and it came finally to an end, to a crescendo in today's parsha, where they died terribly, in a very terrible manner. They, Kairach, and his members of the Sanhedrin that he took with him to their graves, literally alive. Furthermore, we also read in today's parsha that those who were told, the 250 members of their Sanhedrin, that were told to bring their fire pans with incense to the outer altar, together with Aaron, to see who is the real Kohen Gadol, who's the real Kohen. We know that they sadly died in a very sad way as well, through a special plague, and this plague ultimately killed 14,700 people. Sadly, to which Moshe sent Aaron to go and stand in the breach, as it says, between the dead and the alive. And as Rashi brings down in a very illustrative way, which is unusual a little bit, but Rashi brings down this very illustrative explanation as to what really happened there, about how Aaron literally took hold of the angel of death. And the angel of death tells him, I got a job to do. Says, Moshe, sorry, I'm not letting, it says, Aaron, I'm not letting you do the job. I have the Ketores with me. The Ketores is a blessing from God that brings peace and health. So this Ketores that I'm here sacrificing on behalf of the Jewish people, which shows that I'm the Kohen while the others died, is what's going to stop you. And you cannot continue your destruction of Jewish people. It's enough. You did enough damage already. Says the Satan, says the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death, what do you mean you're telling me it's enough? Who are you to tell me it's enough? God sent me. He gave me a job to do. And in general, angels don't have their own free will. They're here to do a job. If God sends them to do a job, including the angel of death, it's God's mission. Now, we may not like what mission God chose for this angel to do, but that's the fact. Nothing happens outside of God's purview. So the fact that he sent this angel to kill people, who is Aaron to tell him, I'm going to stop. You're going to stop. Says Aaron back to the angel of death. Sorry, Moshe sent me here to stop the killing, to stop the death. Enough already. Says the Sultan to Aaron, Moshe? Who's Moshe? I'm a shliach of the boss. Moshe's boss. Who are you to tell me that Moshe sent you? That doesn't mean anything to me. Said Aaron, is that so? Let's both of us go to the tabernacle and let's see if Moshe's the boss or not. And when he said that, that ended the debate. And from there, the plague stopped and Aaron won. Question is, well, what is that? What happened here? The angel of death said the truth. It's not Moshe who's the boss. It's God who's the boss. So who is Moshe to stop him? And he said, indeed, Moshe's not going to stop him. Said Aaron back to him, but you know what? Let's go back and see who's the boss and come back with me. If you don't believe me that God is on Moshe's side, then let's go back and we'll see. And that's why it says, Vayoshev Aaron el Moshe, and Aaron returned back to Moshe to prove that when Moshe says something, even the Malach HaMavis, the angel of death, has to listen. And the question is, why is that? What happens here? What is missing? What caused this to change? Because Aaron says, let's go back to Moshe and find out. You know, in many of the old movies, or even maybe new ones, I don't know. But when I was a kid, sometimes you'd watch a movie or a show and, a person would come in like a Mission Impossible or some kind of a spy movie, and you come and tell the people, the person in the office, I'm here to speak to the voter. So you're here, you're not on the appointment. I don't find you on the appointment. Oh, I'm telling you, you're not going to let me in. If I call your boss, you're going to lose your job. Usually that ends up the argument because now they're scared. The employee is scared. Oh, okay, come in. And the same thing over here. Where did Aaron get this from? Is he just simply lying? He was bluffing, calling the bluff of the angel of death and saying, let's go back to Moshe. And the answer is, and in here lies the whole concept of our connection to a Rebbe, of our connection to the Moshe of our generation, and the power that he has on our behalf. This is the very idea, the very point, and why you need a Rebbe to connect to. And through him, you connect to God. It's not that the Rebbe Chas v'Shalom is a God. On the contrary, because a Rebbe or Moshe Rabbeinu is so united with God's desire and will, it makes him aware of things and knowledgeable of things and knowing how to do things that God himself wants them to do. And that's all you need to know. Once you know that a Rebbe is connected to God, that's sufficient. Now you got to do what the Rebbe wants. Now you got to do what Moshe wants. You say that you know that God wants differently. You know what? It doesn't matter what you think God wants. That's why God chose a leader, a prophet, a person who he speaks through. Because if it's up to you and your decisions and your thinking and your desires and your opinions, you know what they say. Between Jewish people, 2 Jews, you have 3 shuls. Everybody has an opinion. Everybody has something to say, and everybody in Yiddishkeit knows better than anybody else. So you're not going to tell me I know better. Nebuch, it's funny. In America, the superpower of the world, although we're quickly losing that special, unique place that we have, unless somebody saves us. But right now, we're on a downhill slope going real fast. But the bottom line is, officially, why is America are the superpower of the world? It always sufficed somehow, mainly with 2 parties, 2 political parties. Now you can say they've become very ensconced in their power, and they don't change, and because they don't have to compete, therefore they don't do enough, and this is what happens. I'm not here to go into all that argument. The fact happens to be there's only 2 parties. These 2 parties, until recently, now they hate each other, but until recently, even though there were 2 parties, and they were usually on the opposite sides of the political stream, or the political road, so to speak, aisle, nevertheless, they would get together, they would be friends, they would be able to compromise sometimes, like good politicians can do. As the Rebbe once said, a diplomat or a politician, the Rebbe once said, is really another definition for a liar. To be a good politician and a diplomat, you have to be a liar. That's inherent in the job. So, but at least they lied for the sake of compromise, to get together, to get along, to be able to govern in a manner that would still do good for the people, supposedly. Then you take a look at little Eretz Yisrael, little Medinat Yisrael, with merely 6 to 8 million Jews. And over there, you have probably over 30 parties. Each one's vying for at least one seat to get into the Knesset, so that way he can be heard. And in the Knesset itself, you have how many parties? I'm not sure exactly, 10, 11, 12, 13. In this in a little 120-seat Knesset. Luke, tell me, how's that going for you lately? It hasn't been going well for the Jewish people in Israel for many years. If not for Chazdei Hashem, God's kindnesses, and the fact that it says in the pasuk in the Chumash, in Deuteronomy, in Devarim, Eine Hashem Elokecha b'mereishis hashana ve'ad achar shana, as the Rebbe would always quote, the special, unique, divine providence that God places upon his one special country. I don't know if we would be here today. We're sometimes our own worst enemies. And you don't have to look any further than look on YouTube and take a look at a debate in the Knesset, and you're wondering, how did we last until now? But that's us Yiddelach. That's the Am Kshei Eiref. Am Kshei Eiref goes both ways. Am Kshei Eiref can sometimes be a negative, but then it can be a positive. The positive is that each one fights for his principle, and therefore we're not going to let you get your principle, because our principle is the truth, and that's it. So that's sometimes the sad case of our situation. So in other words, to leave it up to us, each and every one of us, we're going to start each one of us becoming leaders. There's a famous story with Eliyahu, who was once traveling with, I think it was Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi from the Talmud. The whole story, how it got to that and why he was traveling them. But in any event, Eliyahu was traveling with Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and one of the places they came to was a city which was very mean to them and very not hospitable to them. So when they left, Eliyahu turned around and said, I'm blessing them that they should have an abundance of leaders. Then they came to another town, and that other town was very nice to them, and very hospitable, very respectful and honorable. And after staying there for a while, when they left, he turned around and says, I'm blessing them that they should have one leader. So after a while, Rabbi Shimon Levi, when he finally couldn't take any more of these puzzling blessings that Eliyahu would give, he finally asked him about this particular situation. What did you mean? The ones who were cruel and bad, and so you bless with many leaders. The good ones, you bless only with what? He says, yeah, because when you have too many leaders, you know what happens. You don't have a society that can last. One good, popular, great, dynamic leader, that's what a place needs in order to be able to be successful. Or as there is a famous story with the Alter Rebbe, who, when one of his colleagues, the great Rab Shlomo of Karlin, who was one of his colleagues, and also they had differences of opinions in certain things, not important right now, but he came to visit the Alter Rebbe. He's a very great man, very well-known man, a man who performed many miracles. And he could also sometimes, if he gives you a look in a negative manner, it's like the Gemara says, you can become a heap of bones. You didn't start up with Reb Shlomo of Karlin. It was too fiery. So he came to the Alter Rebbe, and they sat, they talked, and the Alter Rebbe told his family, his wife, the Rebbe, whatever, and the people in the household had to prepare a nice meal for Reb Shlomo. So immediately the Rebbitzin herself went. She didn't ask any of the maids to make anything. She wanted to do everything on herself as a merit for the sake of this great tzaddik. And after she prepared a whole soup and a pot and a goulash and a cholent or whatever, she left it over there simmering on the stove. A little while later, one of her daughters walks in and decides she also wants to have a schus to be a part of this preparation. So she said, what can she do? She sees everything's ready. I'm going to pour a little salt in. So she pours a little salt into the pot. Okay, then she leaves. Then another daughter comes in, and she's also looking to do something on behalf of the merit of preparing for the tzaddik. So she sees there's nothing to do, so she also pours a little salt. And this went on for the next 2 or 3 daughters that the Alter Rebbe had. Each one decided to be a good girl and do a good righteous deed and pour some salt in. When they sat down later to eat, the Alter Rebbe just kept on eating and eating and eating, no problem. Rav Shlomo Kalina took one taste and he put the spoon down. He didn't complain. He's a tzaddik. But he stopped eating quietly. The Alter Rebbe noticed it with his eagle eye. And he asked Rav Shlomo, "My hi, what is this? Why are you not eating? What's wrong?" So Rav Shlomo said, "Not bissel zu gesalzen. It's too much. It's too salty." So the Alter Rebbe then told him, "Ever since I went to the Maggid in Mezrich, I lost my taste in achil. I burned out. I burned out my taste in food." Rav Shlomo Kalina didn't reach that level yet, so he tasted it still. But what's another moral of the story? Too many bosses in the kitchen, too many salt pouring. You get a pot that you can't eat. So in other words, that's why the Eibishter always appointed a leader, a shepherd, a raya mehemna, or a raya neman, as it says about Moshe, the trustworthy shepherd. It's him you got to go to. He's the address. That's what Aaron is telling us here. And Aaron is telling the Satan himself, who is here to do God's mission. It's one thing to tell me and you, we don't know what God wants. So Aaron tells us this is what the Rebbe wants. You do what the Rebbe wants. The Malach HaMavis knows the truth. That's why he's here. And even then, Moshe has the final call. Why does he have the final call? Because when you're connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, you are able to do what God wants, what he really wants, but sometimes it takes a different manner, a different way, after sadly a very tragic way, to accomplish what God wants through a shepherd who God appointed. And that brings blessing and brings us support in the way that we need. And thus, Aaron knew who the address was. Aaron, by the way, was also a prophet. Aaron was a Kohen Gadol, a high priest. Even Moshe couldn't go into the Holy of Holies. Only Aaron could go. So why did Aaron have to go to Moshe? Why did he? And as a matter of fact, it says in the same Rashi that another reason why Moshe told Aaron to bring a fire pan of incense done by the Kohen Gadol, and that will stop the angel of death, is because the fire incense brings about life and peace. And that ended the death that the angel of death was accomplishing over the Jewish people at that time. And it stopped finally. But we see that it's Aaron the one who's doing it. He's the power. So the question is, why did he go to Moshe? He could have gone to God also. The lesson from here is, no matter how great you are, you can even be Aaron HaKohen, the high priest, who Moshe gives him the credit for many things that would happen then, who Moshe considers almost as an equal. And yet, Aaron also knows the truth. He knows that ultimately there's only one address. When it comes to Klal Yisrael, when it comes to the Jewish people as a community as a whole, you always go to the Raya Mehemna, to the faithful shepherd, who stands there in the breach and ultimately gives us the strength to do what we need to do to, number one, get closer to Hashem, to number two, to make ourselves better, to number three, protect us from all the outside influences and all the outside problems that are going on in this world, that if we followed what the Rebbe wanted, we would be completely protected from all the tragedies that are going on now. Sadly, Nebuch, we sometimes cut ourselves off from what the Rebbe wants, which if you cut yourself off from what the Rebbe wants, you're cutting yourself off from him, chas v'shalom, at least temporarily. No one is really truly cut off. The Rebbe makes sure that whether you like it or not, the Rebbe is going to always be there for you. But the bottom line is, like a true faithful shepherd as Moshe was, but the bottom line is we got to remain connected. As the old saying by Chassidim was, you got to hold on to the door handle. The door handle of the Rebbe is what keeps you connected to him. Whereas once the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, told a chassid about a certain thing to do, and the chassid said to the Rebbe Rashab, Where am I going to be when you go up to heaven? Where am I going to be? What's going to be with me? He was lost without the Rebbe. So he said to him, just hold on to my dartel and you'll be okay. In other words, you don't, or I don't, or we don't have to know everything. It's not our business sometimes. There is no reason or rhyme or reason that we sometimes can understand. But there's a Rebbe. When you know that there's a Rebbe who's there to lead us and is there for us, and you wish to do just one thing, that is to remain connected to him. What does that mean? It's not such an ephemeral idea. No, the Rebbe gave us the instructions of how to be connected to him. And it's only his way, not my way or your way. It's the way the Rebbe wanted. And that is to be connected to his Torah by learning his Torah, what he taught us, by connecting ourselves to the Chassidus that we learn, which comes from him, and all the Rabbeim going all the way back to the Baal Shem Tov, and by connecting ourselves to the things that he issued for us to do, which are whether they're the Miftzayim, the campaigns that he wanted us to do, or whether it is to just be a proud Jew, which he spoke about so many times. Each and every one of us has to be a Mordechai, not to be ashamed, bashful, or embarrassed, or in any way hiding our Yiddishkeit, even in public. That's when everybody will have the greatest respect for you, because why? This is what the Rebbe demands. And if we do it in that fashion, then we remain connected. And then ultimately, when Mashiach comes, the Rebbe will be there to help us meet the coming of Mashiach in a way that will be a beneficial and very peaceful and very blissful, as opposed to what many other false prophets try to tell us, that it's going to be such terrible, terrible things. No, the Rebbe told us, stick with me, boys and girls. Stick with me, follow my instructions, which is Torah, the Torah instructions. The Rebbe didn't make up his own Torah. And I promise you, you will have a sweet, secure, and a beautiful acceptance of the coming of Mashiach, and not be troubled by the things. And with that, I think Rabbi Smith said that maybe some people would want to ask some questions. So I'm leaving you, I think he told me to leave you 10 minutes. I finished on time. Look at that. That doesn't
Unbelievable. Looks like Isaac has a question.
You go up talking, by the way, if you want. But Rabbi Isaac, nice to see you.
Baruch Hashem, nice to see you too. Too long.
Yes.